So welcome all of you to Teaching with the Programming Historian. The objective of our session today is to offer guidance to lecturers, especially those working within the humanities, on how you can start teaching digital humanities tools. The Programming Historian offers a wide spectrum of tutorials covering many different tools in different languages, in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. We're really hoping that at the end of this session, you will all leave the room thinking, I can actually do this with my classes. I'll start by briefly introducing our three guest speakers. So a warm welcome to Joana Vieira Paulino. Joana is a researcher in the Digital Humanities Lab from the Institute of Contemporary History in NOVA FCSH, that is in Lisbon, Portugal. She has a PhD and a master's degrees from that institution, and she applied digital humanities methods and tools in her thesis. She is one of the editors of the Portuguese Programming Historian team. Dr. Jessica Parr is a professor of the practice in digital humanities in the history department at Northeastern University in Boston, United States. They have been a member of the Programming Historian since 2017. Their focus is on the early modern Afro-Atlantic, with interests in anti-slavery resistance, public memory, archives, and geospatial analysis. Nicolas Vaughan is an associate professor in the Department of Humanities and Literature at the Universidad de los Andes in Bogota, Colombia, where he teaches at the MA in Digital Humanities. He holds a PhD in Medieval Philosophy from the University of Oxford and has edited the Programming Historian in Spanish since 2022. He is also part of the Scholastic Texts and Commentaries Archive, SCTA, and is a contributor in the project The Book of Books, Hernando Colón's Libro de los Epítomes. Now, it would be very good if each of you could explain the teaching that you do in relation to digital humanities. Which department are you in, and is it a DH-specific module, or is it a module on something else where you incorporate digital humanities tools?
Me to start?
Yes, please.
My home department is the history department, and we have a fairly large digital humanities program at Northeastern University. It's interdisciplinary group that includes historians, literary scholars, computer scientists, philosophers, etc. And we have both a master's and doctoral program. And as part of that trajectory, students can get a graduate certificate in digital humanities alongside of their degree. We also do offer some coursework at the undergraduate level, and it's an area that the university is expanding. I'm relatively new to Northeastern. I just began, this is my first semester at Northeastern. So when I speak about digital humanities, I'm going to talk a little bit about a course that I taught at my prior institution. I don't think that things would change dramatically from where I was teaching before to where I was teaching now. The course that I taught that I'm going to talk about today was a dual enrollment of undergraduate and graduate students. And there are some similar scenarios at Northeastern where you can sometimes have undergraduate students enrolled in alongside of graduate students.
Excellent, thank you, Jessica. Joanna or Nicolas?
Yes, I can talk now. Thank you. So I teach with Professor Daniel Alves, who is the main editor of the Portuguese team of the Programming Historian. And we have a discipline that is called Applied Computer for History, that is in the History department. It's taught to the first graduation year, during the second semester. And our aim is for students to develop their digital skills and get to know the tools that they can later use on their research works, making it also more appealing on an academic and also on a funding level on their future. It is a very practical discipline, but it has also some theoretical touch in the beginning when we start each module. But on the practical part, we use tools such as Zotero to organize and centralize bibliography and sources. We teach them spatial analysis, Python language program for web scraping, and also this dissemination parts of the work, mainly using Omeka. And on this practical perspective, the students use the programming historian tutorials to deepen their knowledge and to learn in class. We are also starting in the first semester of 2023 a new master in digital humanities on our university. So I believe programming historian will be very important in that master too, in the different parts of it. And we also try for students to engage with us, master students and graduation students, to work in internships, and also to translate some of the lessons on our parts of the programming historian.
That's fantastic. So you bring students in to collaborate with the journal. That's really excellent. Actually, that's really interesting because we have already seen people who use digital humanities methods early on in the first year of undergraduate studies all the way to the graduate studies. So do keep your questions and we'll come to them later on. But as you can see, we have quite a range of expertise. Nicolas, would you like to tell us what is the teaching that you do?
Sure, Giselle. Thank you very much for having me. Hello, everybody. I'm Nicolas Vaughan. I teach at the Universidad de los Andes in Bogota, Colombia, as Giselle has said. I belong to the literature department, and where I mainly focus on classics and medieval studies, medieval literature. I also teach in the master's program in digital humanities from my faculty, in which I teach a module on digital text in a class called Digital Tools. I mainly focus on digital tools and workflows and techniques to work with digital text, from basic digitalization to full-blown markup and transformation. My main focus is on TEI XML, and I teach a little bit of XSLT to carry out basic transformations. So that's mainly my work at the master's degree in digital humanities. As a professor in the literature department, I also supervise undergraduate and graduate thesis on literature. Mostly if my main interest there and the students interested in working with me is to use tools and techniques from the digital humanities, ranging from electronic literature, for instance, and I always want to introduce new students to the world of digital humanities so that they can work on these areas and become digital humanists, not only working in the literature, but in other fields.
Nicolas, you have very nicely brought us to my first question, which is, why should we be teaching digital humanities tools to our students? Why is it that you find that important?
Shall I begin?
Yeah, I think so, because
Okay.
you were quite
Okay.
there already.
Okay, well, as I imagine everybody knows here, there are a lot of perspectives regarding what exactly digital humanities are. I don't believe that digital humanities are a new field or a new epistemology, as some people claim. But I do believe that digital humanities offer classic humanist, if I may speak in that way, new manners, new procedures, new ways of doing all things. So that's my approach. I mainly, in my research, I mainly work with medieval texts, with digital editions, critical editions, and I find the digital humanities approach to working with text in a classical manner, understood in a classical manner, quite useful, and it is very important for me to emphasize the, let us call it, the democratizing and the open access manner in which digital humanities allow people from everywhere in the world to access not only the result of our research, of our students, for example, but also of the methods, the sources, everything is available to them. And that's one of the things I really like about the program historian, the workflow used in the lessons of program historian. So, well, that's my take on your question, Giselle.
Would you mind, Nicolas, just explaining to the people who are not involved in the project, that side of it, the openness,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I can speak of it from the perspective of digital editions and the critical editions. Most of the time when you read a classical text or a medieval text, you see the result on a paper, on a book, or on a website if it's a digital edition. But you only see the result. You only see what the editors conceived of as the resulting text, and of the critical apparatus, if it has, or the sources apparatus. But the reader has no access to the original sources of the on which the editors produce the edition, the different manuscripts, the different printed text, if it's an edition based upon printed text. And the approach I use, and the team I work with use with working with medieval text, allows every interested party to access all source material available for producing the text, not only the result the editors think it should be. So anybody can see not only the transcriptions of the different witnesses, as they are called, different manuscripts, the different manuscript readings. They can also access the images of the manuscripts, and very interestingly, they can also access the reasoning we had when choosing from different versions of different readings of a text. So we decided to use this rhythm because of this, which makes the more available to everybody the reasoning behind our choosing are producing an edition. So that's one example. If I may, I can also talk about briefly about what I have found very appealing about the process of working in lessons from the programming historian. I'm an editor of the Spanish, one of the editors of the Spanish edition of the programming historian. I have written myself 2 lessons, and I have edited a couple more. And it's very interesting because all the editorial decisions and the peer review is done on the open, which is very strange, because most academic journals carry out the revision and the editing behind the scenes. It's a blindfold way of doing that. And in the program historian, all decisions are available to anybody who is interested in that. Not only the people, the identity of the editors on the people, the copy editors, everybody involved in the production of a lesson, but also all comments made by the editors or the readers or the reviewers. And well, I love that approach to transparency. Some people claim that that's too much, but I love that. So that's another aspect of open access and open data and open knowledge, which I fully embrace in what I do and what I teach to my students.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. It is interesting, isn't it? Because one thing that does not happen when publishing with the programming historian is to get those harsh criticisms that you have no idea who is talking to you. Reviewer number 2, right? May I just ask you, Nicolas, when you were saying about being able to, readers can look at sort of background of the research and why decisions were made. I know this might sound like a silly question, but is this done through links in the published text? Like you can click and see the manuscript. It's like a web of text, let's say, where things are interconnected. Is that what we're talking about? Or
yeah, that's one of the ways we do it. Let me see if I can open one of the.
Yeah, just so we can have a visualization. But it does sound very interesting to let people have a peek at how decisions have been made. It does sound like a way of making that knowledge more horizontal and more accessible.
Sure, let me see if
maybe I can let you share screen. Let's see. Multiple participants. One participant can share. I think you can share.
Yeah, I'm looking for the for the resources.
Maybe I can give you a few minutes and we can go maybe to Jessica or Joanna and we come back to you in a few minutes. Yes?
Sure, thank you.
On this matter, I was thinking that it is also very interesting because we try to bring students to the programming historian, not only students from NOVA, but also from FGV in Brazil, because we have a project we are working on together. And it's really interesting because students don't usually publish that early, so they are taking the first steps in they're translating a lesson, so they're starting their first steps in the peer review process. And it's actually much more easier, all the process, because we don't have a reviewer number 2 who we don't know who he is. So for them, it's more easy, and it's a starting point that it's more soft.
That's fantastic, Joana. Thank you for that. So you not only take digital humanities methods to the classroom, but also the editorial process to your students through the
Yeah.
programming historian. That's fantastic.
Yes, they are involved in the editorial process too. Yes, and sometimes only when they are already in the master degree, they also become reviewers of others' work. So we try to engage them the most.
Excellent. Jessica, why should we be teaching digital humanities to our students?
I think in addition to Nicolas and Joana's points, I think that having digital tools, especially in an increasingly technological world, it allows students to sort of push their perspectives and think about research questions and intellectual queries in new ways and new approaches. I find students really kind of light up, especially the ones that already kind of enjoy the conventional history research, suddenly realize what, when you bring in geospatial analysis, you bring in textual analysis, you bring in any other number of tools, it sort of adds this new layer of inquiry, and it's kind of fun to watch the light bulb moment in students' heads. Like Joana, Nicolas, I do show students the editorial process, especially at the graduate level, because I think it's helpful as far as sort of socializing them to that aspect of the life of the mind, hopefully not to sound pretentious, but to think about the ways that information gets evaluated and disseminated and what gets out there. I also like the fact that, both because of the fairly robust editorial process and the expectations around professionalism and the openness, we certainly see reviews that are direct, that people don't soft pedal, but I think because it's out there in the open, there's a little bit less of the anonymous courage. So people are more thoughtful in their criticisms, and they kind of recognize, well, maybe don't put it quite that way. Maybe there are ways of doing feedback that isn't necessarily positive, but is actually helpful and professional and collegial. So modeling that for students, and especially now teaching doctoral students, is super important. That you can be critical, you can be thoughtful without being a jerk about it.
Most definitely.
Yes, I
Go for it,
totally
Joana.
agree that the openness brings a more polite version, and also a more pedagogical one. It's the teaching part, it's much more involved. Yes, and for students, that's really important and also encouraging for them to keep doing their work.
Excellent. Nicolas, did you find something you could show us? Okay,
Sure.
let's have a look.
Let me share my screen.
An example of the open text.
Yeah, but I'm not allowed to share my screen yet.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry. I thought you were. Advanced sharing. All participants. Okay. You should be able to now.
I can do it. Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is a view of one of the editions we are working on. This is an ongoing project and an open-ended one. This is an edition of a work, a very lengthy work by a medieval philosopher and theologian called Adam of Wodan, the 14th century Franciscan philosopher. And this is the edition. This is our edition. So this is what we have decided. This is what we have decided as editors, that let's say the official text should be.
Nicolas, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is it possible for you to make the screen larger so people who maybe are looking at small devices can have a better look? Thank you very much.
Is this fine? Is this better?
I believe so, yes, better, oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. So this is the main text. As you see, it's written in Latin, medieval Latin. It's fully available freely, or all of our sources are available at GitHub, at this repo. Any contributor can, any person who is interested in contributing to this work can do it very easily. They can submit or create a GitHub issue. For instance, if some of the readings we have chosen fail to satisfy their standards, they can create an issue. As I said before, well, this is the main text, the critical text, but anybody can see the different sources of this text, the different witnesses, the different manuscripts upon which the edition is created. They can see the images, which are hosted not by us. Only one of them is hosted by us. They are hosted by different libraries in Europe, and they can see the different readings available to the text. And regarding the reasoning behind our choosing one reading rather than another, well, this is not really available in the front end, but if you want to, you enter the GitHub repository, which is available to anybody freely. You can go here. These are the transcriptions and the edition. We are working also on an English and Spanish translation, but this file called report.json, which I have already opened here, contains all of our reasoning regarding each and every one of the readings. We have prescribed some principles of scholarly editions, why we should choose one variant over another, and for each of the readings of the text, which are referred to by this ID, we have determined why any of the reasons have been selected, and
That's
all of our
fantastic.
reasoning is here.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
so it's open to everybody.
Just that is precisely the format used by programming historian as well through GitHub, the
Sure.
same platform. Thank you, Nicolas. That was very interesting. I would like us to turn now. Yes, I'm sorry.
No, if anyone in the seeing or hearing this this talk is interested, well, they can contact me and I can show you further if they're interested.
Nicolas, somebody is asking for you to share the link on the chat. So I think, yes, thank you.
Of course.
So I would like us to turn now to the teaching of digital humanities, then more sort of defined. Let's start with finding content for a course. So where would you go to find materials to use with the students? How to select which digital humanities skills and tools to start with? Maybe we can start with Jessica for this one.
What I usually do is that I pair, I start off with a discussion because I'm working with students who primarily come from humanities backgrounds and aren't used to thinking about research in terms of data. So I usually start off the course getting to think about what data means within a humanistic digital humanities content. And then I kind of go mode by mode, and I'll pair a little bit of the DH theory, you know, what is spatial analysis? What does that look like from a couple of different perspectives? And then I will pair it with a tool. And what I will do, or sometimes I'll give them a couple of choices of tools. What I will typically do is I'll have them start up front with, you know, learning what is data, learning about data wrangling. I use OpenRefine to teach them about data because it's open source and it doesn't require a knowledge of Python or RStudio, which is particularly important if you wind up teaching online, because you don't really want to get into, especially since I'm not really much of a programmer myself, I don't want to get into trying to troubleshoot in R or Python.
Jessica,
and then
what is this tool you mentioned? Can you say the name again? Open?
It's called OpenRefine,
Okay.
OPEN, and then refine, one word. It's a tool that was built on a Google platform, that it works almost like a spreadsheet. You know, it'll blow it up like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheets. But then
What is
there
it for? What would students do with that?
data wrangling. I'll put that in the chat. It's a data wrangling software. So it is a minimal computing. That's what, as Alex Hill invented that term. It's a minimal computation approach to teaching students. Yep. Thank you, Maya. To teaching students about data wrangling and, you know, how to look through the data and what do the different facets do and what can the data tell us versus what can't it tell us. Just so that we're all starting off with that same perspective. And then I go, you know, I'll cover a couple of different common DH methodologies. I'll do geospatial analysis for a couple of weeks. I'll do textual analysis for a couple of weeks. You know, the first week, they'll get some of the theory behind it. And I try to select from interdisciplinary texts, whether it's some book like a journal like the Digital Humanities Quarterly or other open source journals, or sometimes I will scan chapters from things that are not open source, you know, within the guidelines of copyright, of course. And I'll have them sort of read this cross section. And then we'll go into a tool. And what I like to do is, because I don't assume anybody has much of a technical background, and I need to keep these courses accessible to students who may be very new to working with technology and are, of course, maybe made very anxious at the prospect of working technology, is they'll have a minimal computational tool. And then for the students who come in with more advanced skills, I'll have a tutorial for something that uses, you know, gets their feet a little bit in Python or R, or requires a little bit more advanced technology, just so the more advanced students don't get bored. When I look for resources, I look at tutorials published on other colleagues' sites. I will look through journals. I will look through syllabi from other colleagues that are posted on the web. I have my own, but of course, you know, we all teach differently, and technology and theory, et cetera, is constantly changing. So kind of getting a sense of what other folks are doing to keep my class, you know, somewhat in line with what others are doing. And then I have my students, because we can't possibly expect in what is basically an introduction to DH course for them to be experts on every single tool. Once we get past the data wrangling, I'll have them pick 2 to 3 to specialize in. And then I have them go through run through a tutorial, whether it's something that I post or something in the Programming Historian or from another site. And then I have them put it on a website that they build. You know, I have them build a professional website because digital humanists, it's important to be online and to sort of have an online presence. And then they put screenshots with discussions about their use of these tools onto the website so that when they finish the program, they have a digital portfolio that they can show off to prospective employers.
That sounds really fantastic. Speaking of websites, I just want to recommend Jessica Parr has her own website that has a very interesting list of digital humanities tools. I found it quite useful. I'm sure if you Google her name, you will find her website.
I'll put it in the chat. I should warn you that I haven't updated it in about a year or so, just because COVID teaching, we are all pretty flat out. I might find time to update it this summer or maybe even this spring, but so there may be some things that aren't up to date.
It's still a great resource. Thank you for sharing. Nicolas and Joana, who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Thank you.
So the process is the same as Jessica mentioned for our discipline. And what we try to do from the starting points is to give students a list of sources that can be used and that are now on a digital format. And what we ask them to do is to develop a research project, starting by choosing that platform that they are going to study and with the list already provided. So our topics are divided between theoretical parts, where we talk about the approach and the concept of spatial analysis, and then we go through the tool and the practical part, which takes a lot more time of our lessons. What we try to do is for them to choose a digital platform with historical sources. And from them, they have to develop a Python script to do web scraping. For them, it's a little bit scary because they are not in computer science. So why would they know Python? But when we get to the practical part, I think they are quite enthusiastic about learning how to use it and to see the easiness of how they get all the records and all the data with just a click and a couple of codes. So for them, they are used to digital tools. They are used to using their cell phones and everything. So they are really enthusiastic about these classes. And I think they, in the end, in the beginning, they are a little bit confused why they are learning Python, but in the end, everything turns out great. Then what we ask them is for that records that they are going to do the web scraping on, they have to have a geographical field. So they have to produce the part of the spatial analysis. So we go from the programming lessons to the spatial analysis with the theoretical and the practical parts. And later they have to disseminate the work they have done. It's not like a personal portfolio, which is quite interesting. But they will show what they have done in their work, the records they have collected, the cartography they have made. And this project is mainly done in the classroom, so they have the teacher support in all the steps.
Would they show it in something like a blog post or a forum post, or
no,
how would they show that?
They build a Omeka website.
Oh, okay.
They are divided into groups, and each of the group has to build an Omeka website with all the information structure, the records information structure, so they get to know how to structure the data, how to make it interoperable with other platforms and Dublin Core and everything. So they learn it by using the tools. They have the theoretical part, but the practical part is a lot more important because it's when they understand what they really are doing and what's the result of it.
Forgive me for asking, but it's just the questions come and I prefer to ask. Would you then mark this Omega site, Omeka, sorry, would you then, is that what you use to assess students' learning? Because of course it's a process, isn't it? What would you actually look at to give the student a mark? At the end of the day, you gotta do that somehow.
Yes, they have to provide us everything they have produced, from the Python scripts to the cartography, all the layers of the cartography and the website. So we have to mark everything and to check if the code is okay, if there is no mistake in the code, if there are some comments in the code that later someone can reuse it. So we check for things like that.
So you look at the whole process.
Yes, we look for the whole process. In the end, they are going to show their work in the website, but what they have to provide us is the whole workflow that led to the result of the website. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nicolas?
Sure, Giselle. Well, I can speak about the course I gave on the master's program in digital humanities. The course is divided into three modules. One is on content management systems like Omeka or WordPress or related systems. There's another module on structured text, databases, and visualization. Two colleagues of mine are in charge of those modules, and my module, which is on digital text. If I may, I can share my screen again. So the first thing I teach them to do, because, well, they're just students, all of them digitally literate, as we say today, but they have no experience with coding. They have no idea, and most of them, well, as it is a master's program, they come from a very sundry and different backgrounds.
Nicolas, so I'm gonna ask you to zoom in again if possible.
Sure, of course.
Thank you.
I have a large screen, so this is I always begin by showing them how to create a GitHub account and how to use from their own computers, the different machines, personal computers, how to use Git and to work with GitHub. As you can see, these are all my students from the course I have just finished giving. This is my folder, and those are the folders of each of them. The idea is that I
can't see what you're pointing out. It's all white on the right-hand side or left hand. Maybe it's because you've got a large screen. I don't know.
Okay, let me. Sorry.
Because I can see you're moving the mouse and saying, "These are my students." I see a list of names.
Is it
now.
okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I can see
Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, these are all my students. This is the repo, which is available right now. Is archived, but so nobody can change it anymore. But it's available publicly. All of my students, these are graduate students, have their own folder, and all their assignments are must be placed there. So this might allow for the possibility that one student wants to seek inspiration or to copy the work from another student. That's a risk I want to take, because I think that you can only learn by seeing how other people do it. So that's the first thing I normally
That's really
teach.
interesting. I'm sorry. Would you mind expanding on that? So you have students doing similar activities, and they do it out in the open, and they can, if they want, kind of have a look at how their colleagues are doing it and use it in their work.
Yeah, of course. of course, I want to see the way they manage to grasp the concepts and the procedures and the workflows in the producing their work. But well, everybody knows when you are coding, you always are seeking for source material, for fragments of code in the internet. It's most of the time you're doing that. Nobody really works from scratch, from the tabula rasa. Nobody does that, and I teach my students they can do that and they should do that, and that's the reason why all their work are fully open to them and to me.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about learning and sharing and learning together.
Yeah, some of my colleagues in my university and other universities are very worried about plagiarism, and they use very expensive tools to detect plagiarism in their work. But I work, and I know many people also do that from another perspective. I decide that you can take inspiration from everywhere, as we normally do, but you must be responsible in the final analysis. You must be responsible of the final production. No, it doesn't matter to me where you have taken the ideas from. So I design exercises which allow the students to be creative about the way they use the tools to solving problems I give. Let me show a couple of examples, very
Nicolas, in your case, we're talking about graduate students, right? Masters, PhDs.
Only masters. We
okay.
don't have we have a PhD in programming in literature, but this is a master's program in humanities.
It would be very interesting if you can show us what kinds of things you have them, you ask them to do, please.
Yeah. Well, the main focus of my module is TEI, Text Encoding Initiative encoding. If you're not familiar with this, this is a markup language created in the 1980s by a consortium of scholars from mostly North American and British universities to establish some standards for encoding and marking all aspects of texts. And it's one of the most useful tools in the digital humanities, at least from the perspective of text.
Nicolas, when you say marking, you mean highlighting, commenting, making links, as you showed us before? Is that what you mean?
No, well, that's one aspect, but let me show you an example. Can you see this this text?
I can see a text,
this
but
image?
if you can make it bigger, I think that would be, yes, that would be
sure.
good.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, the resolution is not very good. So this is an example I used. This is an exercise I did for my students this semester. This is a letter from a deceased poet called Alexandra Pizarnik. This is a letter she wrote to another writer, Julio Cortázar. This was while she was in her deathbed at the hospital, and as you can see, it has different levels of text. This might be the opening text, some corrections, some addenda she made, the postscript, some corrections, So the idea of markup of TI is not only to transcribe the text, which is you can do it easily in any word processor, but you have ways of explaining that this word is a correction she made to this other word which has been cancelled by her. So this is and you have words in other languages, in French, for instance. I think Portuguese also here, and you can using TI. You can mark up, and TI is an open standard and an open standard and language and consortium anybody can use without any expensive tools at all. And I teach them how to encode this text, this is a really poignant letter, which I really like. And this is a very tough exercise because there are, as I said, different levels of text. This is another example I used this semester. This is a letter from the Mexican painter and writer Frida Kahlo, and it has also, besides text, it has also graphics or drawings, which can also be not marked or encoded, but at least signaled as they exist in the text. So these are two examples of exercises I give my students. I always choose text in Spanish, although they're expected also to read in English. But I like to choose text in Spanish so they can relate more directly to this, and to make them understand that this is a technique and a procedure and a workflow they can also use in their own research. From each group of this time I had 7 or 8 students. Most of the time one of them decides to carry out their thesis or dissertation on digital text, and they finally end working up with me using these techniques.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Nicolas. For the sake of time, because I want to leave as much time as possible to the audience's questions, I will lump together my final 2 questions. So we're now turning to the how to teach really in the classroom. Like, how do you actually do the teaching of digital tools and techniques? Do you sit with the students while they're trying to code? Do you support them in a way? Do you create an online forum where they can ask questions? How do you actually do it? And how do you actually deal with the fact that students will have a real diversity in their skill level? This is something Jessica mentioned earlier on, and I would like to come back to that, because very often we have real beginners in the classroom with people who might already have some knowledge and even usage of some of these tools. So how do you actually do your teaching with your students, and how do you deal with that disparity? Who would like to go first? Jessica, can I turn to you? Yes.
So what I usually do a mixture of live demonstrations. So when I am, for instance, the last couple times I've taught digital humanities, it's been online via Zoom. So have a synchronous session, but when I do just the tutorial part, I actually record it and then post the recording to the classroom management system, just because it can be helpful for students to, especially those who are brand new to technology, who are anxious about technology, to be able to rewatch it later. plus, students can process information differently at different speeds, etc. I will also post tutorials from places like the Programming Historian or others that are written. So they usually have a couple of different ways of getting access to learning new technology. Alongside of the tutorials, we have weekly discussions that are asynchronous that students can pop in the chat. They have questions. If they can bounce ideas off each other, they can sort of pair with classmates and help each other to work through, because of course, digital humanities is a highly collaborative discipline. So, socializing that they can troubleshoot together, I think is helpful for them. I've also had students create their own class discords, ones that I'm not on, because, the instructor doesn't necessarily need to see everything that they're writing. Sometimes, they need to have space to vent. They need to be able to talk things through without me hovering over their shoulders. So, I'm aware of these discords or these Slack channels, but I'm not necessarily on them. And I let them be the ones to decide if they want to invite me into those spaces.
That's really interesting. Is your university teaching in person this academic year? What would you do differently in an in-person scenario?
In an in-person scenario, so we are back to in-person, and of course I'm at a new institution. What I will do generally is that I will, if I'm going to do a demonstration in class, I will still go and, onto Zoom with a personal, like I'm recording myself, my screen talking. And I will still record that and I will still post it so that it's there. But then I'll do the live demonstration in class and I'll say, okay, I've also posted a version of this up on the web. So if you need to see it again, if there's a student who's ESL, we do have international students who needs to see it again. Somebody was absent, they can go back and rewatch it as they learn, because it can take a couple of passes.
Yes, so that's a sort of hybrid alternative.
Yeah.
Jessica, would you mind addressing this issue of different levels in the classroom? Because you didn't mention it earlier.
Right. So we have a huge range of students technologically. We have students who come in knowing how to do multiple code, computer programming. They might know how to encode. They might already have a working knowledge of XML. They might already know Python. They might already have learned some RStudio, just because we are an interdisciplinary program. What I try to do is aim for sort of a middle ground, where I provide enough resources for the students who are sort of just touching technology, because I think it's good to challenge students. You don't want to teach to you don't want to teach to the students who are completely brand new, because then you'll lose the top 80% of the class. So you sort of aim for the middle pedagogically, and then sort of provide some additional resources for the students who are anxious, and you sort of acknowledge them and say, hey, I know you may be coming in without this background, and that's okay. Here are some resources to help you get up to speed where you need to be. And then I sort of acknowledge the students who may be more advanced and say, okay, I'm going to provide these resources for those of you who sort of already done this and want to challenge yourself further. I'm going to grade at this middle level, but if you would like to take that pedagogy or like to take that technological risk, that learning risk, here's this there for you so that you can go nuts and feel like you're stretching yourself.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. So you provide a little bit more support to those who are new, and a challenging task is there available for those who are comfortable with the topic. Thank you. That's great.
I'll just quickly add, one of the nice things about the way the Programming Historian is structured is if you look at the top, we rank the relative difficulty of the lessons. So there's 1 which is sort of basic beginner, 2 which is intermediate level, and then 3 that is for people who have more comfort with tech, probably have at least some programming knowledge. And you can use this for a guide. So, you know, if I'm doing something where it makes sense for them to have more background, you know, where they would want to have some, let's learn how to do this in Python, I'll post it and I'll say, this is sort of for more of an advanced audience, but you can use these rankings. The programming historian uses as sort of a guide to pitch at the different levels. And these are levels that actually the authors of the tutorials themselves designate.
I love that tip. So if I get this right, you're suggesting people can use the programming historian's difficulty level to gauge whatever it is that they want to teach their students. Yes. Introductory topics, you're going to find there, level 1, average topics, average difficulty. And we're not saying, you know, you need to use our tutorials, but you can use that section of the website to have an idea of what's out there and how difficult it is for your students. That's a great tip. Thank you for that. Joana, Nicolas, who would like to go next?
Yes, I can go. I was
Okay.
also thinking that, for example, on the spatial analysis lessons, tutorials, you also have a package of lessons, so you can get inspired about all the package that you can teach in the classroom. And of course, the first lessons are easier and the last ones are more difficult. So it's easier to get inspired and to manage. When it comes to our classroom, in teaching in our classroom, our work is mainly practical. So we sit with students and try to help them, and we do like first parts when we teach everything and they follow us. And then a second part when they work on their research project for each model. And we are there to support them and to help them in their needs of each part. And we also had some, due to COVID, now the lessons are in person, but due to COVID, Professor Daniel also made some videos with step-by-step for using Zotero, for code in Python, for cartography and ArcMap, and they are all available on our Moodle. So all our students have access to them. And actually, I think those videos are really interesting and really useful for the beginner ones, because they can take their time watching the videos and doing all the steps on their own and on their time. Not only the videos, but also the programming historian lessons, because we try to make students read them and do all the tutorials, so they can practice outside the classroom.
Joana, and how do you deal with students who have issues? A student who is doing a tutorial, something doesn't work, how do they actually get to you?
They send us an email, or they talk to us between classes, and we try to help them the best way we can. Actually, as the research project they have to do is a work group, we also try to reinforce the importance of students with higher proficiency to work with beginner ones. So it is really important also for them to get to work together and learn together.
That's really excellent. And it speaks to my question on how do you deal with different levels, right? So then you have groups with mixed ability, and people with more ability can share their knowledge and feel good about that, isn't it? Because sometimes people can get frustrated if there's nothing there for them.
Yes,
but
of course.
The sheer fact of being sharing and leading others is that old idea that by teaching you learn more. We all know
Yes,
that.
of
Yes.
course. And I also find that it's really useful for them to do the work during the during classes, because they have the support right there. So the teachers are there, and we can help them a lot more easier and a lot more faster. So it's different. We sit with them and we try to.
So in a classroom, would the students be around a computer in their groups
Yes.
doing their project? And you are
Yes.
around to help if and
Yeah,
when needed.
If anyone needs help, yes, I'm there to help them to do their project. Yeah.
Excellent.
We try for them to make it alone, to be the most independent as possible. But whenever they have some doubts, we are there to help them, or
And how?
even to, as Nicolas was saying, to make them look for the code online and try to see if you can solve it yourself.
Good. So you don't necessarily have all the answers, right? Sometimes
Yes,
it's
I don't
about how to
necessarily-
find
yeah.
the answer. I think that's
Yeah,
really
sometimes,
important to
yeah.
highlight.
Yes, because sometimes they really don't know how to look for the answer. So if we just give that tip, they can look for it, even if they are in the classroom, or if they are doing their work at home. But sometimes they just need that tip to know how to look for and where to look for. So.
And how and where should people be looking for answers when trying to code? It's an honest question. I don't know the answer. If I am trying to code, what should I do to find the answer to a problem? My code doesn't work. Where do you go? You Google? No. You do?
Yes.
Stack Exchange.
Yeah,
Maya said,
Stack
Maya, I have to
Exchange.
say, Maya has been very useful. She's answering all questions in writing in our chat. Thank you, Maya.
Yes. It's perfect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joana. Nicolas, how do you do your teaching? Chatbot rules. I'm not sure. This is Nicolas.
Yeah. Chatbot. Well, it's an AI bot. Many programmers are afraid of them today because you can find a lot of information from that resource. You can try it out. It's pretty new. So
What is it? A website?
Yeah, it's an open website. It's really an artificial intelligence AI bot. You can ask any questions regarding coding.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
So, for example, how would you do a loop within an array in Python, and it gives you the code and explains to you, so you don't have to Google it out. So it's quite new and well, I'm very interested on using it in my classroom.
I was about to say, it sounds like an interesting resource to use with students. Thank you.
Yeah. No, sorry, not chatbot. It's Chat GPT. Thank you, Matt. Okay. So as to your question, there are very few resources on the kind of research I do with PI and digital text in Spanish. I think that's, but Joana may correct me, I think that's also the problem with Portuguese. There are a lot of resources on English. So one of the first problems I had when I began teaching in digital humanities some years ago was where to find resources in Spanish and make them available for students. And that was quite a, let me share my screen again. That was quite a problem with me. So what I used before was to show them very interesting projects. For instance, the Women's Writers Project, which is at Northeastern University. It's a project I really like. They have a lot of useful information on dealing with this. Another resource I use, which this is a classic text from Lou Bernard. This is the What is the Text Encoded Initiative book, which is available freely. I wrote a Spanish translation of the book, and I used it in my classes as well. And that's what the reason I decided to write 2 lessons in the programming historian on TI, which are available here. And I use them in my classes. I give them previously to each session to my students so they can follow along. How to install the software, the required software. This is the second part. And this is a third part written by Gabriel Calarco and Jimena Rio Grande, which is an extension of DI, which is to publish DI text in JavaScript library called Citation, which is really nice. And I use all of these resources in my classes. How do I proceed in each of the sessions? Well, as I said before, I give them this information before so they can follow individually before the class begins in their free time. And you can see there are some example texts which are encoded, and let me see if there's something here I can show you this in the second one, perhaps. So they can try to encode, yeah, for example, this. How do they encode this postcard from the poet, the Spanish poet Federico García Lorca? But I use different examples because I want them to do this by their own. And during the session, which since the COVID pandemic began, we have been doing this virtually, not in person. I go step by step with them, trying to show them how to carry out this encoding and allowing them to do them by themselves. And we go very slowly. Some advanced students lose their patience because they can do the exercises very easily. But well, other students which are not so familiar with these technologies and with these workflows take a little bit more of time. But my responsibility as a teacher to them is to go with each of them in their own pace. I also meet with them if they want during the week before the class, in person or by Zoom, and help with the problems they are having. So my approach is, yeah, to allow them to do this exercises by their own. That's their responsibility. But I lead them all the way through the process. And they also have to do, this is done in class, and they also have to do an individual homework for each week, applying the concepts and the tools and the workflows learned in each of the session on a different text I give them for work.
Nicolas, so if I understand you correctly, you have all of your students doing the same task, which is a little bit different from what Joana does, right? She's got a team and they're doing their own project. You've got a task, a little bit like the problems you showed us before, right? You set these problems, yeah, and you have everyone do them. They try individually and they have the support of the tutorials. That sounds really, really excellent. And
yeah, well, I can do this. Yeah, I can do this because the group is very small. Let me think. The largest group I've had with them is 10 students at most. So I don't need to create groups of students. When I have, I've also given workshops in my university, and I have groups of 30 or more students or faculty.
How does that change your teaching?
completely, because I need to work with groups. I like to use group-based or team-based learning, and so I have to divide them and assign specific tasks to them. So it's different. I'm very fortunate, although it's not very good for the finances of the program to have few students, but I'm very fortunate to have 8, 6, or 7 students, which I can work individually with each of them.
I'm really glad you made that differentiation, because this session is all about showing people what's possible. Some people might have more students in class, some people might have fewer. So there's different kinds of patterns that you can employ. I also want to highlight that Nicolas, as an expert in the TEI, has actually published his teaching with Programming Historian. Of course, everyone watching here is also welcome to do that. We accept submissions all the time, and if you are already teaching digital humanities tools, all you need to do is go to our website and see what's already been published. And if you work with something that we haven't got lessons for, or if you do something that our lessons don't cover, we would like to hear from you if you would be interested in publishing with us. I would like to say goodbye now to those watching on YouTube.